Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Turned Out a Punk Classics, a show where we take old episodes of Turned Out a Punk that have been lost from the internet and return them to their previous glory by sticking them back on the feed. You can find this podcast on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and all other forms of social media. Well, that's pretty much it. At Turned Out a Punk. You can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Left for Damian. I play in a band. More information can be found at fuckedup.cc. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy another TOAP Classic. Lou, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
No problem.
Well, this is like I was saying, the fourth time that I've now interviewed you for some different format or something.
Yeah, this is
but this will
twice on video, twice captured. Our images were captured. And now the second time on a device.
Yeah, this time though it's going to be nerdier. It's going to be I was saying it's going to be a little more about talking about like the bands you like. This is the sort of stuff that if I were trying to ask it for much music, they would have been like, "Who do you think this is going to appeal to?" But this is my podcast, so I don't care who it appeals to as long as it appeals to me. Right. And you, of course, Lou. You factor into this too.
Okay.
I want to start it off though the way I start them all off, which is going back to how did you get into punk? Do you remember the first time you ever kind of came across it or heard it?
Well, I moved to Massachusetts. Well, I guess no, it wouldn't. I saw Devo on Saturday Night Live.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that comes up a couple times on here too. Yeah. What do you remember that performance at all? Do you remember anything?
Yeah, I mean, it just completely, it was scary.
Yep.
Because they prefaced the whole performance with, like the original kind of promo clip that they had made. I can't remember, so they prefaced their performance with the film that they had made.
Yeah. It's like the Jocko Homo thing, right? Like,
and it seems like it's like a pseudo-fascist kind of like space age, really scary. And now, I mean, for me, I guess, I would have been 10 or 11, I guess, when I saw it. And I would stay up. I was visiting Ohio at the time because my relatives lived down there. I'd come from Michigan. We would visit. And during those periods, I would be able to stay up pretty much all night with my cousin, and we would watch Saturday Night Live. And so we watched that, and it just completely dusted me. I was like, what was that? Like, oh my God. Like, that was insane, and then shortly after that, we would also travel to Philadelphia to visit my grandmother and grandfather who lived there. And there's a town, Devon. In that period, someone had went to not everyone, but almost all these different, traffic signs or highway signs and taken out the D, or the N on Devon. So it just said Devo.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So this town of Devon was turned into the town of Devo for a brief period in the late 70s around Philadelphia. So I was like, what is with Devo? Like, my God, it struck me. I was like, it was this strange, performance and film that I had seen on Saturday Night Live. And then also, obviously, the people who were into this band were now defacing, public property, and like, what is that? It was pretty fascinating. It definitely was. So that I guess would have been my kind of initial introduction to something that was like very they didn't even call classic rock at that period. It was just rock and roll, Yeah. But it definitely introduced, it's something that was very different,
Well, I think it's funny that would have been your first exposure, because I think, a lot of the stuff you do, especially, in Sebadoh and stuff, you're kind of pushing the boundaries of what, I guess alternative rock would have been at the time, or indie rock or whatever. And it's like Devo's kind of doing the same sort of thing with, I guess all music at that point too. So it's interesting that would be your first kind of exposure to the genre.
Well, it was definitely, it was meant, it's like a mind fuck, basically. And early Sebadoh was it was a mind fuck. That's what we wanted. Like, I wanted to make music that just really kind of scared people, I guess, and that Devo scared me. So, and then I saw the B-52 shortly after that. I mean, they put a different spin on it, but they were also very just otherworldly, it's like, what the, cool.
So, I guess, like, where do you kind of go from there? Like, I guess you saw the B-52s on Saturday Night Live as well when they did that performance?
Yep.
Did you remember, like, kind of the first, like, were you hearing any of this stuff on the radio, or was it being played on the radio at all, or could you find it?
No, I mean, I didn't. No. I bought the first B-52s record, and I don't remember when. I think it would be maybe 79. I feel like that was one of the first kind of, but I moved to Massachusetts from Michigan. So like in 1979. So, and I was also obsessed with, transistor. I had a transistor radio, and I was really I had like a little map on my wall, and when I would hear a station, I would like sort of pinpoint it, because the AM signal travels hundreds and hundreds of miles, so it was like this real exploratory thing where I just start at the bottom, at one end of the dial and work my way to the next, just through all the static, and then finding these stations, and then listening to it long enough to find out where the station was originating, pinpointing it on a map. And, I got really into that. I was really into AM radio. And, and then, so when I moved to Massachusetts and, kind of started my radio search on the FM dial, on to the left of the dial, I heard Holiday in Cambodia.
Oh,
just
wow!
Coming coming out of the static, I was like, what the like, what is this? Like oh my god, because I was like, this, like, it sounded like, because to me, I guess the most radical music, other than Devo or the B-52s, the most radical music I could really think of would be Jimi Hendrix, like Are You Experienced, and that stuff sounds crazy and it's amazing. But the Dead Kennedys, when I heard it, I just was like, it was obviously someone who could play the guitar incredibly well. And that song, Holiday in Cambodia, just as far as the guitar work goes, it's a masterwork.
Mm-hmm.
It's this psychedelic surf guitar, incredibly blown out production, and not blown out so much, but just really, it's an intense production, and it sounds, and to stumble on that was pretty mind blowing, and so I was like, Dead Kennedys, like, what the fuck is that? Like, man, what a name, like, oh my god. And then I stumbled in, pretty quick succession, like all of these different stations at the left of the dial, because this part of the country in Massachusetts is, there's a lot of colleges here, and all the colleges have their little radio stations, and the radio stations are being run by the students, so, I heard the Dead Kennedys, and it was actually on a Connecticut station called WHUS, which I think is the University of Connecticut, but,
I think I might even play that. I think they have a radio station still.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
Connecticut.
Most of them do. And most of these stations still exist. WHUS.
Oh, yeah. And college radio is still like a really valid, amazing sort of medium for exposing people to this kind of music.
Yep. And that was my, that would have been, I guess, luckily, or, for me, fortuitously, I heard this as it was kind of happening, so these, the Dead Kennedys record would have been just released at that time. And, of course I went out and found that, and it totally blew me away. And then I heard the Teen Idols, the very first Discord 7-inch. I heard it on WAMH in Amherst, because the guitarist from Government Issue was going to Amherst College. So he and his friends brought up the first 7-inches from DC and were playing them on WAMH. And that's how I heard.
Oh, that's
That's how I heard the
awesome.
Teen Idols. And I even have like my little notebook at the time where I would hear something, write down what it was, and have Teen Idols, written IDOLS, thinking that's what it was.
Yeah.
But I heard that, and somehow there happened to be a newsstand in my hometown that had the New York Rocker, and I found the address. I saw Teen Idols and like an ad in the back of it that said, "Here's the address to order it from," and I ordered it. I mail ordered the Teen Idols record. So that was my, that was my sort of introduction to sort of the beginnings of the hardcore movement, and so I started mail ordering records from Discord, and like sort of fortuitously right when it was happening. So, and it didn't cost much. It cost $5, so I was able to, if even that, I don't even remember, but it was just, I just sent my literally like $5 in an envelope and, got it back.
I think it's $2.50 postage paid, right? Is that what it used to say on the?
It could have been, yeah,
or something like that.
It was.
So how old would you have been at this point?
Well, I don't know. I mean, when was that? That was like, was that 80 or 81?
81, yeah, maybe like when Teen Idols is like 80.
So it would be like, yeah. So 60. So I was 10 and 76. So
it's like 14.
14. Yeah.
14, 15. So
14, 15.
So where were you went and you said you bought the Dead Kennedys record. Do you remember the store where you bought that?
That was pretty available, that stuff like so I would have bought it at Platypus Records in Westfield, Massachusetts.
Were you hearing about shows on these stations at all, or were you kind of like hearing about like sort of the larger culture that was kind of happening, or were you aware, I guess, at that point of the larger culture that was happening around it?
Not really. I mean, I knew that there was actually, in the town that I lived in, there was a band called the Vandals, not the same, not the same, but and one of their friends lived right behind me, and they all pretty much dressed like the Clash. So I'd see them walking around with their kind of like spiky haircuts and their, thrift store jackets and stuff. And I'm like, whoa, who are those guys?
Yeah.
So I knew something was happening on that level. And then there was, I guess there's a weekly paper, sort of alternative paper that in this area called the Valley Advocate that kind of had a left bent to it. So they kind of covered the scene, so I knew that there were club shows happening around in the area, in the general area that I lived in, but they were all like 18 and over. I didn't really I went to my first all ages show. I can't remember how I found out about it, but it was in East Hampton, and it was, like, 5 or 6 local bands at a porn theater. And it was like on the afternoon, and I came to East Hampton, and I saw my first show, and it was so the Vandals, the local punk rock band, had broken up and become like 2 or 3 other bands. I think it was the Junior Hostesses, the Stupids, and Eighth Route Army.
Oh, whoa! Eighth Route Army.
Yeah, they were actually called Section 8 at the time, but they changed their name to Eighth Route Army shortly after. But at first, they were called Section 8. And
wow, they kept going for a long time. They put out a grip of records, right?
They did. You've heard of them?
Oh yeah, I've got like an LP, and I think 2 or 3 of the 7 inches.
Wow.
But yeah, like that LP is kind of weird too, because one half of it is awesome, if I remember correctly, and the other half is like not so hot.
Yeah, they kind of wanted to be stars. I mean, they wanted to be. They were kind of like in the, in the sort of the wake of the Clash. So you had bands that were like kind of politically leaning, sort of, but at the same time they were like rock, they were kind of like into it. They were into being on stage and like looking tough and wearing leather jackets and like posers, basically. They were totally comfortable with being posers. So Section 8, 8th Route Army were totally the poser fucking Clash band, but they were great. They sounded awesome.
Yeah.
The Stupids were like this very proto hardcore band, like really fast, like really. They were a really odd band and noisy, really legitimately noisy. They had a female lead singer who just screeched through the songs.
Whoa! Did they record?
And they were pretty hardcore. I mean, they were actually really like, but they were older too. They were very strange. It was just they were almost like they were almost like a homespun version of. I hate to say the Plasmatics, but they almost were. It was almost like that because they were so odd. It was just, but they weren't as theatrical or anything like the Plasmatics. But there was something very, just real buzzsaw guitar, like really loose, and they were kind of, I would say, the real kind of maybe the first hardcore-ish band from this area.
Did they record it all, or are they on any comps? Because the name sounds really familiar.
Well, they put out a tape.
Okay.
And there's I don't know, you probably would know, but there's this Italian label that they do really obscure, like early hardcore records, and they did like a split LP of like one half was The Outpatients.
And the other half's the Stupids. Yeah, that's where I knew it from. Okay, absolutely.
Yeah. So then that's their tape. They put out one tape. That was it.
So were they Outpatients affiliated?
Well, they were local. Outpatients were from my hometown, but they started as a band called Mace, who were a Motorhead cover band, and Mace became the Outpatients, and Scott was in the Outpatients and Deep Wound at the same time.
Oh, okay. So I know the connection between your two bands, but there's so it was just like, I guess, a geographical split and why they did the Outpatient Stupid split. Because there's no shared memory or no shared lineage, I guess.
No, I mean, that's the same scene,
Yeah, same scene.
But that's it.
So where did you kind of go? You go to that, obviously you see the Mace show, and then you go and see this sort of like 3-band Vandals offshoot show. Is that kind of where you kind of get immersed in like going to shows?
Yeah. I mean, and then I met Jay shortly after that, Scott, Scott and I Scott from the Outpatients, he and I kind of we form a little, the beginnings of a band, in my attic. And then we put an ad in there's a great local music store at the time called Main Street Records, which is in Northampton, which is kind of the epicenter, the really great record store in the area. Although there were a lot of record stores, really, but this particular one was really great because they had imports and they had cool guys, punk rock guys working at the store, and so we put up a little flyer there saying that we wanted a drummer, and that's how Jay contacted us.
Yeah, and the legend is that he had the craziest record collection. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, he had a lot of imports. Like he had Discharge records. I think at the time, I think I had, I was mail ordering American records. So I'd had like the first, I had stumbled on mail order, and so I had, I was mail ordering Black Flag, Meat Puppets, and then all the Discord records. And Jay just had. Jay had all these amazing Oi, Discharge, he had the imports going on. So, yeah, and he had like a turntable right next to, he would just be lying in his bed. He could play records by not getting up. It was amazing. He could just lie down, reach into a stack of records while still lying down and put a record on it. It was amazing. So we'd go to, when we first started kind of hanging out or practicing, we'd kind of like enter his lair, this room that was just insane, like really dark, with like moldering sandwiches on the windowsill and glasses of water that literally had mold in them. Which takes a long time for a glass of water to mold. It definitely does. It really does. So he'd just be lying there, and then he wouldn't say anything, but he would just put a record on and then just, drop the needle on a discharge record, and you'd be like, what the fuck is and then, but he would pull, everything he'd pull the needle up halfway through any song. So you'd be like, what? And then you couldn't really ask him what it was, I kind of have to, I still do that. Like, I don't ask him direct questions. I just I just look around to see if I can pick up clues, It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. No, I think it's definitely the way I find, like him and Mike, I find so similar in so many ways, but it sounds very much like what it was like living with Mike. Mike would clean up his sandwiches, but, but it would definitely be a dirty room, a very dirty room.
Yeah.
Also, I guess that's the story is that I remember asking him about it when he was on the show that he bought like all the crazy UK records. He just like saw this crazy oi list in like Trouser Press and just mail ordered all the records off that list.
Yeah. Yeah. And I did the same for just
American, right?
American stuff. Yeah. And I also was, I guess speaking of Byron Coley, he was doing reviews in the New York Rocker at the time, and his reviews were really, they affected me. Like, I actually bought records because of his early on.
Yeah.
So,
and he ultimately would have like, he's like got like a deep punk kind of lineage, Byron Coley too, with like some stuff he's done as well since then as well, without exposing anything. Where did you kind of like, I guess from there, where did you guys, Deep Wound, actually back to Deep Wound, I guess that's where the sound comes from, right? Like it's like Jay having that kind of UK discharge drumming, and you have that American hardcore kind of ferocity kind of being applied to it too. And then and also that's the thing about everyone says about Deep Wound. It's like probably pound for pound the most talented band to kind of be around at that point. Like Gerard says it's, to this day, like the most talented group of musicians he thinks he's ever worked with.
Really?
Yeah. Like when he was on this podcast, he was saying like it was unbelievable, like how every single member of that band could have been doing any type of genre at that time. And just happened to be playing punk and hardcore.
Yeah, I couldn't really do it. I really couldn't do anything else. If I could speak for myself, I was completely, I didn't have any, I couldn't play any other kind of music. Until I heard the Ramones, I didn't really even think I could, play in a band. So.
Well, when did you hear the Ramones?
That would be like, like
early
80,
on?
70, 80, not really early, no. The first Ramones record I bought was End of the Century. Mm-hmm. So, and then I kind of worked backwards from there.
So were you hearing the Ramones at the same time you're kind of hearing all this, like, the Teen Idols, or was it kind of before that? Because I guess
slightly, but you really just slightly before. If I look, I think in my memory, if I think of it, you know how you look back at things and you sort of imagine these incredible gulfs of time between things, and then you realize like, oh shit, that was 2 weeks. You know what I mean? Like just that. I did do the. It was a pretty, Oh, that's cute.
That's my cat, Mr. Pickles. He makes cameos from time to time on this podcast.
That's really cute. Okay, so he, so anyway, I had a neighbor who also happened to have like Singles Going Steady and Rocket to Russia. So I had heard those shortly after I moved to Massachusetts, while also discovering college radio at the same time. So that would be,
And I guess back to Gerard's point, like it's kind of, like ultimately you kind of would be able to play any genre of music, right? Like not any genre of music, obviously, because there's like immense scopes of music out there. But like, like you've like yourself, you kind of been able to go on and do like this huge breadth of styles and completely sort of disparate types of projects. So I think Gerard was right. But
come on, there was like Poison Idea.
Yeah, but Gerard didn't work with Poison Idea.
There were bands that he didn't Bad Brains.
He didn't work with Bad Brains. I'm saying that he worked with. Sorry, I should say from that.
Okay, that he worked, but even then, I'm just like, okay, that's. I guess for me, like the way that I learned anything was like by rote, and then I didn't really. I mean, I really embraced like the Ramones, the sound of the guitar. I was like, I just thought, I was like, that's it, and I became, I mean, I was like that was like that inspired like a feeling of religion to me. I mean, I was like, that is it. That sound is now my religion, and this is the sound that I will pursue in every way, any way that I can, through anything that I put my hands on. That's the sound that I'm going for, which is just the density of the strumming, I was like, that is it. And even when I, you know, played acoustic music, I wanted that density. I wanted that kind of like, just that just that thickness of the sound,
Mm-hmm. So I guess also back to Gerard. Do you remember the first time you met Gerard Cosloy?
Well, I mean, he was, no, I don't have like the first time I saw him. No, I can't. I mean, I know that he was just, he was very, very fun. I mean, he had a show on WMUA, which is the UMass station, and his show was amazing, and he had a great voice, and he was doing Conflict, which was incredibly funny, which was, kind of intimidating as well. I mean, intimidating, like, a lot of those early, I mean, just like forced exposure, like the quality of the writing and that stuff was just, I mean, it's just, I don't know how to describe it, but it was very intimidating, and it was very, for lack of a better word, macho almost,
Mm-hmm.
And Gerard kind of had a similar kind of just like real, just off the cuff, but like lacerating, really, I mean, I remember the thing with Gerard that kind of made him interesting was that even though he had this really harsh style, he seemed to really embrace some very non-harsh music, which was interesting to me. Like he would, he was really into the Virgin Prunes and kind of almost, he wasn't. Whereas, things like forced exposure, like were very liberally throwing around the word and, like, and printing Baboon Dooley cartoons, which were these incredibly homophobic, there was a lot of homophobic shit going on too, like with the scene. And so as, meeting Gerard was a bit, he was sort of the beginning of seeing outside of just that kind of hardcore, tunnel vision, It was someone who appreciated hardcore, but also was looking outside of it. And which anyway, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, were you like familiar with him just from like sort of your days of searching the FM dial type thing before going to shows even?
Not before going to shows, no. I mean, Gerard came around, I mean, by that point, Jay was going to school with him, I think, so that was kind of later. I mean, that was like 84 that Jay would have been at UMass. So that was kind of the waning days of the hardcore scene as I knew it. And then
he was already though your manager by that point, right?
Yeah,
like, in 83, he becomes your manager, right?
I guess. Yeah. I mean, those kind of, I don't really know. I mean, those were decisions Jay was making on his own. I mean, it'd be like, oh, Gerard's managing us. Oh, okay. It wasn't like we had a meeting, we didn't have any like strategy meetings with Gerard where we sat down and thought about that. It was just like Gerard's man. I'm like, okay. What does that mean? I don't know.
He's trying to get you guys sponsored gigs. He's like, hey, I got a Deep Wound opening for the cap. I don't know. I'm going to go some stupid computer joke there. Anyway, so, Deep Wound's kind of going at that point. What was it like, the reception for you guys? Because it's so much faster. Like, I think to me, it's always just like the Neos is kind of what, obviously the Bad Brains too, but like you guys approach, it's like you guys and the Neos, I find, are the two bands that are kind of like going to that fastcore side of things.
Yeah. There were other ones. I mean, I remember, oh God, I mean, it seemed like there was a lot of fast bands. We also played shows with Siege, they were out there too.
Yeah.
And they were like, and then also, all of the Boston bands, SSD, Jerry's Kids, FUs, they all had fast parts, just they had the real like, there was definitely, that was going on, and, people were definitely taking the Discord bands and hyping that up. That was like just pushing that. But I mean, I guess maybe we were. I don't know what the reception was to us. To me, there was, you were playing on a bill. We would be playing low on the bill with like, 10 other bands, and I wouldn't even be looking up. I would just be like bearing down, sweating, and just, my experience of playing for a very long time was just fear. It was just absolute blind fear, just stepping on stage and then something happening for the next 15 minutes and then walking off and having no idea what had just occurred. And then also assuming and also being so hard on myself, just assuming that it sucked. Always. Never, ever, ever, never, ever, ever walking off the stage like, that was awesome. We were great. I bet everybody's really dug that. That would never, ever, ever happen. Like you were just head down just to present as much fury and rage as possible within your allotted time and then just skulk off the stage and don't even look up. I mean, I don't.
So did you have that fear before you did it for the first time?
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure.
What compelled you to do it then? I
don't know. I mean, because it just seemed like the coolest. I mean, cool. Like, yeah, it seemed like the coolest thing to do, being a band. I mean, that was the other. If it goes back to the experience of like watching Devo or, for the first time, you're like, well, there's a band that does not give a shit about like fucking, like being a rock band or going, yeah, everybody. Let's do this together. Like nothing like that. It was all just, it was actually, Devo, they were a hateful band. If you you cut it down, you're like, they did have quite a bit of showbiz to them, but the ultimate, like, the message that they were sending was definitely like, fuck you, fuck society, like fuck everything. They were it was very, antisocial.
Well, it's funny because I interviewed Mark Mothersbaugh years ago for a magazine, and he was like, the inspiration for the band was Kent State, and just realizing that we had devolved to this point where we're just killing people for protesting, and so it is like a hateful band.
Oh,
it's taken up so comically.
No, I mean, God, just even buying like the Devo, DVD collection of videos and listening to the commentary, you're like, oh my God, these guys are dark. It's just, and that kind of darkness. I mean, even the Ramones too. I mean, like just head down, stand in one spot, wham. Like that was my. That's why it seemed accessible to me, because I was like, I could do that, and I want to do that. I want to be. I don't know. I want to. I don't know exactly why, but I want to present. I want to be a part of this thing, this kind of like almost just this reaction basically to show business, and this reaction to consumer, quote unquote, consumer society, and I wanted to be a part of that, and that's what it all, and I didn't really see bands that were really embraced performing until there's exceptions, but when I saw the Big Boys for the first time, and there was a band that seemed to really enjoy themselves, and you're like, whoa, okay, that's interesting. And the Minutemen seemed to really be enjoying themselves, and that was kind of those were kind of like those were nice moments. Those were kind of when that kind of like oppressive, just that kind of, because all the Boston bands were just nasty, not fun, not all of them. I mean, actually, that's not entirely true, but in general, that was.
But there is a nastiness to it. Like there's that, like the back of the DYS choke diving shot. Oh no, it's the SSD. It's the SSD, right? Not choke. It's not choke. It was people always said it was choke, but it wasn't choke. For the guy jumping in the air with the swastika on his balaclava.
Oh God!
You remember that shot? It's like that famous shot. And it's
I think
like,
so, yeah.
there's like a real nastiness kind of to
Oh, no, it was
some of it.
all of it. No, I mean, I went, I went to like, I saw one of the first sort of big shows I saw was in Boston. We went to see the Dead Kennedys.
Mm-hmm.
And I slammed for like 10 seconds, and that was, I never, ever did it again. Because it was like this, I mean, because it was the whole, of course, it would have been the Dead Kennedys even before people decided they weren't cool. So it was like absolutely packed and full of the crew were all there, and it was brutal. And then I was like, yep. That's it. I'm not slamming.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be doing that because people get hurt, and I don't want to do it. So I didn't do it.
Just because I wanted to touch on it before we go back to, and I go down this hardcore wormhole about Boston hardcore with you. But like, do you think that kind of like Devo and that kind of like, even what you're saying you had in Deep Wound is what you were getting across with those early Sebadoh shows? Because that's the thing also that comes across by a lot of people that have been on this podcast, is how unbelievable and transformative those early Sebadoh shows were, but also how violent and terrifying they were.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know, Tom Sharpley when he was on here talked about how crazy those Sebadoh shows were. A lot of people have talked about how crazy those Sebadoh shows were.
Really?
A few people.
That's definitely a thing? Really?
Yeah, like it's funny because like I think that's, and I definitely, I associate with Sebadoh because like by the time I, became aware of it just as the age I was, it was already like, oh, that's an indie rock thing,
Yeah.
But like you forget that like, oh yeah, there was like a point where before indie rock became codified and everything, where it was like crazy, like Suck Dog and Sebadoh shows were just like
it was pretty gnarly
performance art pieces.
Yeah, well, I mean, Eric Gaffney and I really like. Eric Gaffney was a huge Devo fan, and we were really into Public Image. We were into Johnny Rotten. We were into John Lydon. We were into like the sneering. Like he was great. Like the great. Like if you would have asked us in 1985, what our sort of pivotal experience, it would be like, oh man, no, the time that John Lydon was on the Tomorrow Show.
Yes.
like that's it, and then like the first PIL performances that you would be able to, you're like, that was it. This is like the most, they were more than the Sex Pistols, I would say. This PIL was because musically they really cut things down, and truly they were very sort of creatively ambitious in that they stripped everything down and tried to make it wasn't about rock, and they were making this anti-rock, and it was really inspiring.
Yeah, and I guess they were also...
go on. Anyway, Eric Gaffney and I the two of us we were kind of a, I don't know, we were real brats. We were pretty funny. We were definitely into fucking with people and really, and Eric was he still is. He's very comfortable on stage in a way. Like he's into it, he's like, so he was kind of like hooking up with him really allowed me to kind of, he emboldened me, he kind of enabled me to really embrace being on stage, but still do it in this really, but kind of do it in a real edgy way. So
he had a hardcore band too, right? Like No Alternative or something, or punk band.
He had a band called Gray Matter.
But before Gray Matter, didn't he have something else, like some high school band? I remember hearing about.
Well, he was in so many. Well, Gray Matter was his high school band. It was
after that. Anyway,
he had Gray Matter, and then he was in and out of like a lot of bands. That's all I could say. He was in Sebadoh more. The fact that I was able to, extract as much music out of him and tour with him was kind of really miraculous. Now that when I look back on it, because that guy like was all about burning bridges, and he was amazing. He was like, he's the guy that would just, he's like, let's just, he would find out where the open mic nights were, and then just go and destroy open mic night. Just completely, where their open mic nights would be a bunch of like really earnest, folkies lining up to perform the new song that they were working on that week. Or, a really great cover of, Rolling on the River or whatever. And Eric would just get up and do complete fucking anarchistic improv and bum everybody out and get thrown out, like that was his jam. And, and when I hooked up with him, that was our spirit. Like we would just like, let's not play any songs this show. Yeah, fuck that. Why should we do that? I don't know. Let's just make it up. Let's get really, really super high and make it up. Great. And then it would all just, it would just devolve. That's what we wanted. That's what we did. So that did characterize Sebadoh shows for quite a while. Yeah.
I guess ping-ponging as we are back through time. Back to that Boston scene that we were kind of talking about. So what was your first... Do you remember the first sort of like big Boston band, like the DYS SSD kind of Negative Effects band that you saw, or one of those ones?
I went to a Gallery East show, and it was Jerry's Kids. Might have been the Mighty CEOs. But Gangrene. They were just, they were so good. They were like my absolute fucking favorite. And they were fast. I mean, talk about fast. I mean, they were like, Gangrene were kind of yeah, they were crazy. They were so fucking good. And they were like, live, they were awesome. Like they were just this completely, because the other band, like that kind of like SSD sound was something that the, DYS, even the FUs, they had a similar thing. It was just that kind of real Boston, like almost, hockey. I don't know. There's something jockey about it. There was something, but Gangrene were truly like off the fucking hook, like just totally free, like just freedom. They would just like kick into a song. You're like, where's the beat? Who the fuck knows? There's just this kid jumping and screaming, and it's like really fast, just really. They were amazing. That was the first Boston show I saw. They played, and they by far just completely, they blew every band away for me, And then they all, shortly after that, there was the Process of Elimination tour came through Boston. Mm-hmm. So it was like Me Puppets, Negative Approach, Necros, and Gangrene opened that show. And they were like, well, I think they did. I'm sure Jay would be like, no, they didn't. Maybe they didn't. I don't know. I know I saw them one other time. I thought it was that one, but that show was amazing. The Process of Elimination show was fucking great.
Well, so were you already a fan of I guess you had mail ordered some of those singles by that point, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had the touch and go stuff too. That was my. So I was like really, I loved the Necros. I thought they're not their first 7-inch, but the 9 song.
IQ 32.
Yeah, the way that record sounds it has such an interesting production, really kind of interesting and kind of like reverby, and there's something really emotional about that record, and it's really beautiful. It's a really beautiful little record. There's just something really sweet about it, and of course, like the Negative Approach 7-inch too, which was just fucking like so good, like so much, and they were so great live. It was just, it was great.
So at that point, are you kind of like, I guess like you guys are playing these shows? Is this before or after the infamous? This would have been, I guess, way before the Last Right show, right?
Yeah, I don't. The Last Right show didn't really
stick
out in my memory, so I think that was more like,
infamous in my memory,
happened.
Lou.
I mean, I remember I saw Slapshot after that, and they were funny. I mean, they were really.
What did you see? Were you at that Mission of Burma last show with
no,
the riot or whatever?
No, I never saw Mission of Burma. I missed Mission of Burma. I missed Minor Threat. Sad.
Do you see Negative Effects? Did they play?
I never saw them.
You never saw that. So Last Rites would have been your first. Well, I guess you would have seen Choke around the scene, right?
I guess it was really hard to tell those guys apart, to be perfectly honest. I'm not gonna lie, Damian. They were all a bunch of fucking.
Yeah,
they were scary dudes. I mean, I was, I still had like. Actually, no. I mean, no, I did kind of shave my head, but I never was bald. I mean, it was just they were bigger. I mean, they were just like literally bigger men. They were big, and they were scary. And, once the band would click in, you'd be watching the show, you had to get the fuck away from anywhere, like anywhere they were.
Yeah.
I was not there. I would just, anytime I would go to a show, I'd be like, where are they? Okay, I'm going to stand way far away from those guys. Because the minute the music starts.
It's funny because that stuff gets so romanticized now, right? Like,
I guess,
people look back on that now, but it's like, I guess to be there at the time, it would have been fucking frightening.
I was there for the music, I mean, I was really, from the, that kind of like, I definitely brought a lot of aggression when I did play my own music, and even, like we're talking about with Sebadoh, but that was, I don't know how to describe it, but it wasn't like that kind of the physicality of the scene, and even just skateboarding and stuff. I wasn't into that. I was risk averse. Like all of the risks that I was going to take were going to be mental. It was all going to be just mind fuck stuff, not physically, not risking broken bones, like nothing like that. I was more about just, really just the mind fuck,
So but I guess though I do have to punish you though about that Last Right show, because it is one of the legends that they only played that one show, and that's it.
And it was here in Greenfield, right?
What do you remember?
It was in Greenfield.
Yeah, and I think you guys did the show, right? Deep Wound booked the show.
I guess Jay was he was pretty ambitious. Like he did book shows and he did call people, and he, I existed very much inside myself for a very, very long time. I found people, like even, I found people and pretty much just people to follow, basically. I skulked in people's shadows. I was not Jay was, he booked shows. He made flyers. He made phone calls. Jay was, motivated. And Eric Gaffney later on, he was someone who was motivated. I found those people and followed them. So I was personally, very shy and very, not in there, not in the pit, never in the pit.
Well, it would have been a terrifying kind of, pit to get into, in every way. Booking the shows too. And doing all that stuff. I
didn't do it.
So what do you remember that night? Do you remember? You say it doesn't really stand out in your memory. They didn't play very long, right? They played like 2 songs, 3 songs.
Yeah. There was probably a shitload of other bands. I wonder. I don't even know what the lineup was. It could have been. God, Brain Injured Unit could have played that day. Gray Matter could have played that day. I don't know.
I think it was. I think Outpatients played.
They were always the best to me. They always put on the best show. Any of those shows. To me, they always kind of, with the except, there were some out of town bands that did truly blow everybody away, like the Big Boys. And, it was always fun when Crucifix came through town. They were pretty funny.
They were fucking awesome, that band.
They had the best haircuts. They would be like, wow, these guys, they were fashion plates. They looked great. They sounded like Discharge. Mm-hmm. It was, they were fun. But Raw Power came through town. They were funny. But yeah, those shows were like just, every band was like just such distinct personalities. I can't even, God, I don't remember the Last Rites thing. I don't know.
Just kind of blends in. Well, were you into that? Yeah. Were you into foreign hardcore and stuff? Like, you mentioned Raw Power. Were you like writing away and getting into any Finnish stuff or any of the Scandinavian?
The Finnish stuff I did. Yeah.
So
I was really into that.
What was the first band from that scene you remember hearing? Or
well, I got a compilation. What was it called?
Rutger Bombs Finland?
Maybe. It's a really ugly cover. Like, you can barely read it. It's like all red and white.
Oh, was it the Propaganda comp?
Yes, the Propaganda comp. Yeah, and it had like Ritzjet.
Yeah.
And
Tervit Cadet, I think, is on it.
They might be on it. Tervit Cadet, I got there was a 7-inch that I got that's amazing. The cover of the 7-inch is someone hanging upside down with a candle in their ass.
Oh, yeah. What is that?
Great 7-inch. It's really good.
I can't remember.
But the compilation was kind of cool because there were some of the bands were like oi bands, sort of, and then there were like all the Discharge bands, and it all sounded like shit. It was amazing. Just like really, some of the bands could barely play, which is awesome. That's one thing I love is music that's played really poorly. It's one of my favorite. That's like I love it. I love it. Just. And there was a lot of those bands were like that, on that, at least on that compilation. But the band that could really play well was like Tervit Cadet. And, I mail ordered that stuff. Not so much. That was kind of it though. I didn't really, Maximum Rock and Roll put out like a pretty good, international compilation that kind of came on the heels of Not So Quiet on the Western Front.
Yeah. Welcome to 1984.
Yeah. They did that one. I liked that. But, I didn't have unlimited funds.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the thing.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say, it's just that this thing is like, you forget that like, oh yeah, this stuff all would have cost money. It's not like today where you can just listen to all this stuff for free.
Yeah. And you're not Jello Biafra. You just don't write a letter to somebody and then they send it to you.
No, unfortunately, who's Jello Biafra in 2016? I ask you, who can still has that pull to do that in this day and age? Maybe Kanye, but that's about it. So I guess like you were aware of sort of the international scene that was happening. And also Eric used to write scene reports for Maximum Rock and Roll, right?
Yeah, he had his own fanzine.
Yeah.
He has a little fanzine here called Withdrawal. No, was it Withdrawal? Yeah. And, Eric was into it. Yeah.
So in that song, Gimme Indie Rock, you kind of make a point that you started smoking pot at a certain pivotal moment. Do you remember when that was?
Yeah, I graduated high school in 1984.
Yeah.
And then I went on a road trip with a friend of mine, and we went up to New Hampshire. My family was vacationing up there, so he and I drove up there, but actually we went sort of a really circuitous route. We went through to visit people that he had been to school with, and we smoked pot the whole time, and we listened to Harvest by Neil Young, and it was great.
So were you straight edge, or did you identify as straight edge prior to that, or?
I did, yeah, just because I didn't have any drugs, so I didn't do them, And I didn't, I was just like, well, that's easy. I'm straight edge. I didn't even really try, It wasn't really, I didn't have any friends who did drugs. I didn't have it, that nothing was, I guess it didn't really totally appeal to me either at that point, so.
But then you started smoking pot, like in your music slow, as the song goes.
Yep.
And I guess that's like, what was that like for you? Cause I think you're like me and someone who, is in your head a lot. What was that like for you? Like kind of leaving behind punk, or did you feel like you were leaving behind punk, or was it just like moving on to a different style of music?
I don't know. I guess I really thought that hardcore got boring, I thought it became really streamlined.
Do you remember the record or the bands that were like, you're kind of like, yeah, this isn't for me, like the next wave, I guess?
I was really disillusioned by the second. Yeah, I can tell you precisely what it was. What was the, I kind of liked the second 7 seconds 7-inch.
Yeah, Committed for Life.
Yeah, it was like I kind of liked it, but then I was like, oh no, something very bad is happening.
Whoa!
Because I thought that they had a really unique sound. Like Skins, Brains, and Guts is one of my favorite records. I mean,
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
I love the way it sounds. I think the band has a really unique style. Love the production. It's really incredibly melodic. Really, I mean, it's just a wonderful record. And then it was like Minor Threat happened, and then bands just started turning into Minor Threat. So it was like Committed for Life, and then it was like Verbal Assault and these kind of like, and then there was, I think, even a, like, those bands in California, like America's Hardcore. You're like,
Yeah.
what? Like, why is this band called America's Hardcore? This is so dumb. Like, what the fuck? And then
You're just killing all my gods right now, Lou. You realize that? It's like stab, stab, stab.
Well, you're younger. I mean, this is different. I mean, this is like a real.
No, I know.
I loved Minor Threat. I mean, to be totally clear, I mean, Minor Threat was like, the first Out of Step and the first EP were like, God, hugely important and just really, I loved them. I loved them dearly. They shaped me. They got me through my high school years. They were, incredible. But I think when I started to discern that it was a style that people were just, to my ears, literally copying, and then I was a little disillusioned. So
yeah, and I don't blame you on that front. It's funny though, because Committed for Life is that record for me. So it's interesting that was the record to you that killed the genre.
To be clear, I liked it.
No, but I can. And in saying that though, like I can hear exactly what you would have heard when I listened to it. Like that is where you're right. Like it does start getting a little more kind of codified and entrenched in what things were going to be. But for me, my gosh, that song, I shaved my head and it changed my head. That got me to high school.
That's great.
So were there like friends of yours that you had that were like, I can't believe you're not into Verbal Assault. I can't believe you don't like this record.
No.
Learn. It's the greatest record ever.
No, because at that same time, like my friend Scott, who was the bass player for Deep Wound, he got into that really early speed metal, So this would be like, the Metallica tape had sort of circulated and, maybe Kill 'Em All was like on the horizon. And then there were all these Metal Blade records that were coming out. And then, this was like, and then there was, Accept put out like Fast as a Shark, that 7-inch. And the first Venom 7-inches were coming in. So there was this incredibly vital, obviously, like speed metal scene that was starting to happen,
Yeah. So that was like, were you into that stuff too?
Yeah, I was into it. I wasn't obsessed. I mean, there was no way not to be into it. You'd be like, I mean, when you hear Bloodlust by Venom, you're like, this is fucking incredible. Like, this is the greatest. I mean, like, and Fast as a Shark by Accept. I mean, it's like, it's undeniable. You're like, yep, okay. This is great. This is great music. It's awesome, and it's, no, it was, to me, that was the big split. The big split to me was like, like, the people that I knew either went metal or they were like Jay and I, and they just went into fucking further into just, I guess, even more broader music, I guess. Because then it became, because even then, something like REM was actually like a very legitimately vital band. You're like, REM, they sound fucking great. What a cool band. And then there's all these bands that were like, sounding a bit like that, like becoming what they would have called college rock at the time. And then that stuff sounded really good to me, and then there were the bands like Dream Syndicate and from LA and these kind of
Paisley
Underground things. And also the offshoots of that, which were a bit more aggressive, like True West and Dream Syndicate.
Yeah. I love True West too.
True West are great.
And they're kind of like, no one talks about that. I love Dream Syndicate, but they're kind of like obviously more fondly remembered.
I really like True West is the band. The first, that 12-inch EP that they put out is like awesome.
Yeah. I love that record. It's funny, that scene, considering like Dream Syndicate and the Bangles both kind of come out of it, it doesn't really get talked about. in any sort of music
No,
press way?
not really. Not too much, anyway.
Well, my God, Lou, I've talked to you for a long time, and I could talk to you forever about this sort of music nerd stuff, but I'm not going to, but there's definitely some things that I really want to hit on. And I want to do a part 2 with you sometime down the line. Next time we're
Okay.
stuck in a festival area back together, I'll force you to record on this thing. But I kind of want to definitely talk about, Gigi Allen. Now, it seems like everyone in your region had some sort of relationship to that band at some point. Did you have anything, or what are your Gigi memories?
I have no Gigi memories. I didn't buy his records. I don't know.
You're never into it at all.
No. Not because it wasn't, I mean, I don't know. He could have had some good records. I don't know. I mean, to me, there was like, when you would read the reviews at that time, you'd be like, if I ever saw, there was one just, they have like these, you'd have like, what were they calling it at the time? I mean, there was the things that I really were following were like, I wanted the fastest hardcore possible. So if I saw the tag 77 punk on anything, I'd be like, fuck that. I don't give a shit. If it's slow and some guy talking about raping a woman, I don't care. I don't want to hear it. Like, I don't, because I mean, now as a record, as more of like a, now it's like, now it's great because people make like the Killed by Death compilations and they put all that shit on one record and I can hear it all then. But back then it was like, I'm not going to fucking mail order a GGL. Like this, I mean, you would see, it was just this, I understand the interest in it, and I think I guess he did make some great recordings, but I don't know any of it. I didn't follow it.
Well, there's that kind of weird period where, I don't know, like, and this is from someone who's looking at it after the fact and from miles away, where it felt like, there was kind of like that Sebadoh, Suck Dog, and then Gigi Allen was kind of like, maybe that's a little later on, but like part of that roller derby scene. Did you guys never have played together? I guess he was in jail during the early Sebadoh years.
Yeah, he wasn't really. No, I mean, Suck Dog was kind of around. I mean, the only time I actually really ever saw her was, she might have been dating Bill Callahan when he was doing Smog. I mean, we played lots of shows with Smog. So I think she was kind of peripheral to that, but
I think the first Smog record's actually a split with Suck Dog because he was playing in Suck Dog at the time.
Well, he did a bunch of. He's an interesting cat because his. He did these kind of the lo-fi records first and then just slowly developed into this incredible songwriter, and we played a lot of shows with him early on as Smog and they were awful. I mean, it was like, he was just,
that first 7 inch is not good. The split with Suck Dog, like her side's awesome, but his side is like,
well, yeah, I mean, I really liked her records, but I never played with it, and I guess that kind of, I mean, we never ended up doing shows. I loved her fanzine. I loved Little Flowers Dying record, I think it was. There was that period. There was like Royal Trucks were making some truly fucking deteriorated music. Mm-hmm. Suck Dog and the early Smog recordings, were pretty just just abstract, really. And that really appealed to me, but that was pretty late now that I think about it. That was like, when would that have been? Like 89, 88, 89, 90, 91 maybe?
Probably, right?
Yeah, so it was, and I like that stuff, but we never ended up playing with Suck Dog. I was just like everybody else. I just read about the shows and scenes, and I liked her writing.
So what scene did you kind of feel a part of with Sebadoh? Did you ever feel a part of a scene at all, or?
I don't know, we played a lot of shows with Polvo.
Yeah.
And we really liked Louisville, so we knew, so we kind of knew there was a band called Crane from Louisville that we would play shows with fairly often, and we played. There was that kind of like, we played a lot of shows with like Superchunk,
mm-hmm.
And so it was almost like that kind of, I mean, I think we probably had more, even though we didn't, we played a lot of early shows with Royal Trucks. But we were also like kind of, I mean, like I was, Yeah, we would play shows with Superchunk, and then I would say really shitty stuff about Superchunk. We had no particular like loyalty to any scene or. Yeah, but when we met Pavement, when we actually we did some shows with Pavement, and they were definitely like of a similar, mindset.
Yeah.
In a way, like their early. They were they were not nearly as like negative as we were, or quite as, as we were. We were still kind of a semi-terrorist band for quite a while, like into the 90s, but they never really had that going on. But they had Gary, that guy, fucking Wild Gary, playing drums. They had the guy that was like 20 years older than them.
And they also kind of come out of punk rock too, right? Like he had.
They do, yeah. Because Gary, their drummer, I think he'd even recorded some of the stuff that showed up, like on the Not So Quiet on the Western Front compilation in his studio.
Whoa! I didn't even know that. I was going to go with the fact that it was Malcolmus played in that band that was like the Authorities, kind of like junior band.
Oh, really?
The Authorities that have that song "I Hate Cops."
Yes. He
played in their there was like their junior band that they kind of like recorded.
Oh, really?
Demos and stuff. Yeah.
That's what I heard. That there's some kind of peripheral. There's something peripheral to, because I love that compilation.
Oh yeah,
so much. Like I can't even like. Oh my god,
that's awesome.
That compilation to me is like when people. There's been sort of discussion like, what are your favorite punk rock records of all time? I'm like. They're all compilations, and they all have like fucking 40 bands on them, and I love every single one. Like that record in particular is amazing because because you have this the really highly evolved, developed musical punk or hardcore that's on it. Like whatever the Dead Kennedys doing, like A Man with a Lawnmower, whatever that song is, is incredible. And then you have. On the other end of the spectrum, there's literally like a boombox recording that these kids made of like walking around their basement. You know that? It's called Off to War.
Yeah.
I think I can't remember if the band's, I can't remember the name of the band, but it's called Off to War. It's on the Not So Quiet on, but it's this band. It's just drums and guitar and a kid walking around a basement with a boombox singing into it. You can tell. It's amazing. It's like unbelievable. Anyway.
Well, I guess the power of that kind of like the genre of punk is the fact that, like, you were saying yourself that you couldn't get, this was the opportunity you had to kind of like break that wall and realize that you could be a musician in a band.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was completely, totally enabled and empowered by that. And there was an awesome period where there was a lot of recordings like that before it became kind of streamlined. It was cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and before I do wrap this up though, I got to talk to you about my favorite topic to hit on, because I don't think we've gotten a chance to talk about this too much, which is the kids' soundtrack and recording the kids' soundtrack. Because I think that's such a fun. That record holds up. Like, I listened to it again, and it like is amazing. And I think I don't think a lot of people realize how much of a score that soundtrack is, more than just a soundtrack. So I don't know. Can we talk? Like, how did that whole thing come together? Like, do you remember the first time you met? I guess Harmony was the first guy you met, right?
Yeah, Harmony wrote me a bunch of crazy letters that I didn't believe were real, But my girlfriend at the time, my first wife, started to write him back, and then pretty soon he was like, "I'm going to do this movie." I'm like, "Okay." And then I ended up going down to New York and meeting him and hanging out with him and Larry Clark, and they sort of drew me into the early process of making that movie. And Harmony really wanted to do like a lo-fi soundtrack for that movie. He was really, 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 and he wanted to draw primarily from my 4-track recordings. But as we got involved in the recording of the soundtrack, the music supervisor, who's to this day like a very successful music supervisor named Randall Poster, but he was like, well, we're going to do this stuff that Harmony wants, these 4-track tape recordings, but we also want to put you guys in a studio and have you just. So I was working a lot at Fort Apache Studios at the time, and had a great. It was there was a really great spot at that time because you could just book some time and go in, and whoever was recording you would do a great job. And so we booked some time at Fort Apache, and John Davis and I, who was sort of my primary collaborator at that period, like he and I were in a really cool spot just as friends and collaborators. So I brought him into the studio with me, and we just started making stuff up, based loosely on scenes that were being filmed at the time,
So you had a script too, like they brought you in right from the script, kind of.
Oh yeah, I had
the casting and everything.
Exactly, I was given the script for Kids, and then Ken Park, which is, I think, it might have actually been made afterwards.
It was, yeah. It was supposed to be made first, according to the story, right?
But they were just these incredibly crude scripts. I mean, I couldn't even believe. I'm like, what? He's having these made into movies? Like, holy shit! But then when I met Harmony, I was like, well, that's how he did it, because was a real talker. He was just this little, incredibly precocious, brilliant little kid.
Yeah.
And so he was talking, and he had kind of aligned himself with sort of the modern art scene in New York, and just could talk a lot of shit, and people totally listened to him. So he got his movies made. It was pretty amazing.
What did you think when you saw that script? Were you like, this is going to actually fly, or did you?
I didn't know. I mean, it was just very crude. I mean, it is what it was. It was exactly what it. I think it's interesting. The movie. I mean, when I did read the script, it did seem very crude. That's all I did, but I don't know. I'd never really read scripts before, But compared to what you would normally, movies usually have a lot of really like dialogue that doesn't sound anything like what like people actually speaking. This was actually. It was like, well, the one thing I could say for it was that it definitely seemed to represent how, teenagers communicate. It was very monosyllabic and crude, so in that, like Harmony, he had a vision. He had a whole vision surrounding it, and he was able to, when getting someone like Larry Clark, who was this notorious photographer involved as the director of photography, was a brilliant move.
Well, and also it's funny how many people's careers kind of get launched out of that, and how much of the aesthetic of youth culture kind of came out of that movie, for better or for worse at times. And also just like what a phenomena that movie was. Like people were talking about it like on news programs at the time, like, should we let our kids do this? I remember my friend's dad wrote an article saying that parents should watch this movie with their kids at the time and discuss it with their kids afterwards. And it was like a big controversial issue at the time.
Yeah. Well, that was a very, they did it on purpose. Let's put it that way. There's a better word for it. It was kind of planned out, because when it was pretty clear early on into making that movie that they brought in some pretty heavy producers, there was money involved. And, it wasn't like they made this movie and then like somehow became this word of mouth. And it was calculated, and it was done in New York and within the modern art scene, and also, with very established, producers. So there was a lot of heavy hitters brought into it, and we realized that as we were doing the soundtrack, towards the end when we were going to screenings where like there were a lot of people there and a lot of like industry people, and you realize the way that they talked about stuff, you're like, oh, Jesus, here we go,
Yeah. Yeah. And the soundtrack was on a major label, right?
Yeah, it was on London Records, which was a whole other thing. That was my first real introduction to the record biz, to like the upper echelons of the record business as well.
Yeah. Was that was that at all unnerving at that point, or was it just so gradual that it just kind of?
It was. Happened? You know what? It was really gradual, and all the people that I was involved with, like Randall Poster, who was the music supervisor, he was sort of in cahoots with London Records, which was this guy Peter Kepke, who would like sign Salt and Peppa and stuff like that. But he was actually really nice. They were very, very cool people, and they just really wanted to set us up. Like, what do you need to make this? What do you need to make this music? And I'm like, I don't know. A week of studio time. Great. Okay. And then they were really nice, and then they'd come up to Boston and take us out to really nice meals, and
So would you get daily rushes of it, or would you just kind of like base it on the script?
No, not daily.
Or not daily rushes.
No,
would you be seeing
they started sending us VHS of scenes. Yeah, they'd be like, here, score this one. And we'd be like, okay. And, what about this one? I'm like, okay. Like, yeah, we would, it wasn't quite, we were still kind of removed from it enough, thankfully, that we were really left to our own devices, and they communicated to us through what I now understand to be pretty general ways. Because what can happen is you can easily get caught into those kind of things, and then just a part of a lot of dialogue that it will make you want to fucking shoot yourself in the head. So it's best to not, like, the way that the people who make movies and talk about music, and it's offensive. So, but we weren't really exposed to that. So it was great.
Yeah. Well, how about picking out the other bands that were on that? Like, it's Slint, Daniel Johnston. Was that? I guess that was your choice, I would imagine, right? Or was it theirs?
No. It was Harmonies. No, it was Harmonies. Harmony was Harmony was he was a hipster at the time. So, he knew Slint were cool, of course I was hugely into Slint. So I was like, and they're like, yeah, we want Good Morning Captain. I'm like, great. Good choice. And we want Daniel Johnston. I'm like, well, fuck yeah then. Great. Why not? Do it.
Well, I guess that shows through on the Gummo soundtrack, because that's a crazy, unbelievable soundtrack as well.
I love that one. I love that one. I love Gummo. Gummo is like, I'm so into Gummo.
It's that for me, I think, was my first exposure to I Hate God. Maybe I heard him on community radio, but like that was my first real exposure to I Hate God. And Sleep's on that too, I think.
I know the fucking that Sleep song is awesome. Oh. And then also the scene, when I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
That was my introduction to, like, oh yeah, there's a bunch of like hipster metal bands now that sound exactly like Black Sabbath. I'm like, great. Because at that point it was like Saint Vitus, and then like nothing for a while, and then
Trouble, I guess. Yeah.
Where's the next wave of Sabbath sound-alike bands coming from? Like, oh, there it is. Sleep.
Well, that's like, and that's also, you've done sludgy stuff, obviously, over the years. Have you ever wanted to do like a full-on sludge band?
Yeah. I've never gotten around to it, but
we should do that.
I'd love to, but
I would love to.
It's a lot of parts. That's the problem with that stuff.
Yeah, but they're very slow, so you can take your time writing them.
No, I don't know. I get too. I had, Dale, when I lived in LA, like Dale Crover was kind of like, he was a friend, and we jammed, but every time I would end up jamming with Dale, it would just become like songs. I could never stick to the because he's a really musical, person. So the one thing that we did do together just ended up being pretty song oriented.
Have you ever done a bass, like, they swap out the bass players, obviously. Have you ever done that with the Melvins?
No.
Oh, that would be awesome. They had kind of
asked about it. They had asked about it, they wanted that. Because they're so, but I don't know. I get my domestic life is, between my domestic life and my life with Dinosaur Jr. I really, truly
don't have a lot of time now.
I don't have a lot of time.
So you're saying don't hold my breath on the stoner band, because I think if you started smoking the super pot that's around now, you'd start liking your music really, really slow.
I don't know. I've tried with Dino. I've tried with Dino here and there.
I know. I love those songs. Honestly, I'd like, also like, there's also like some dirgier moments in Sebadoh stuff too.
Oh yeah, no, I always try to throw in the random Sabbath riff here and there.
Yeah. So I guess that's the thing, is like your secret sludge. Who knew?
Oh, I'm I mean, Black Sabbath are, they're one of my favorite bands.
No, I know, but that you go deep with it too. You're like into the modern sludge. You got to check out Cough.
Cough?
Yeah, I think you'd like Cough.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Lou, as I say, I could punish you all day about music and stuff like that. We barely even got the surface scratched. We didn't talk about, well, I'm glad we didn't talk about all the stuff you talk about other times too, but my gosh, I would love to have you on again in the future.
No problem.
Awesome, Lou. Thanks, buddy.
No problem.